house and, asked us to come to church there. And then that's how we kind of got the connection that Sandy Smith was, that her dad was a pastor here. And we started coming to church. And when I was a little kid I can't remember how many years, that'd be the early 60s. I was 5 years old when we moved to Oberlin Avenue. And so we were there, and we came here. And I remember when the pews were wood, there was no narthex back there or anything like that. Went to Sunday school. And as I got a little bit older, Mom and Dad tried different things, and we started camping. And so pretty soon we kind of lacked off from going to church because we were going camping every weekend. And so we kind of got away from the church at that time.
Like Christianity, though, was a big part of your upbringing, though?
Yes, it was always at home. And Mom and Dad both. Mom especially. I remember, I have a hard time a lot of times when we're singing the songs out of the old songbooks, because when Mom was working, she was singing hymns. I could tell if she was doing laundry, if she was doing dishes, if she was canning green beans, whatever she was doing, she was always singing Christian songs. And I remember that my whole life.
That's pretty important to have as a kid, though. That makes a big impression.
Yes, it does.
What about your siblings? Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I've got 4. I've got 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters. And living at home was great. I was the baby. I got spoiled rotten. And we had the ideal upbringing. Mom was a homemaker. Dad was a go-to-work guy. And Mom was always there when we came home from school. And it was just, like a storybook upbringing.
That's awesome, because that's not, everybody's upbringing is like that. So
No.
That's awesome to hear. You, the other day I was talking to you, and you shared some early stories from your childhood that were kind of memorable. I think the congregation would enjoy hearing that. One of them was about nightmares. And can you tell us about that?
When I was little, I had nightmares. I just bad dreams about anything you could imagine, scared to death of dying and stuff like that. And Mom was always concerned, and she'd think of different ways. And so her idea was that she gave me one of the little red New Testaments that they give you when they come and visit or you first go to church. They're little tiny red ones. I think there's still some around somewhere. And she gave me one of those, and she said, put that under your pillow, and God will give you good dreams at night. He'll take away those nightmares. And I slept with the Bible under my pillow for a long time. And it even kind of wore off into when I got older, too, because when Krista was little, she had some bad dreams, and I had one of those little New Red Testaments. I said, here, put this under your pillow. And she did. And so it kind of continued on.
Wow. How about the story? You had sort of a pact with your brother about not ratting on each other. How'd that go?
When we were kids, we lived on Oberlin Avenue, and there's a big woods behind the house. And so when we left in the morning, we may not come back for 4 or 5 hours back home for lunch or dinner or whatever. And we were kids. We were doing what kids do, mean things, not so good things. And Mike, my older brother, was 6 years older than me. And I had always known about God and feared God, but Mike always kind of planted in there that you better be good or God, something bad will happen to you. And so every time we'd leave the house during the day, we would stop in the middle of the trail or wherever we was at, and we'd make a promise to each other, and we had to say it to each other in order for it to be binding, I guess. And we'd swear to God that we wouldn't tell on each other for what we did or said. And we'd say it to each other. And me and him, we'd get out and just, we'd say a cuss word, or we'd smoke a grapevine, or whatever, something like that we thought was just horrible. And when we got home, man, it was zipped up. There was no telling on each other, because if you did, God would get you.
So God was involved in this, apparently.
Yes.
Tell us about the story with the tractor.
This is pretty tough. When I was 15 years old, before that, Mom and Dad had decided that Dad always wanted to farm. And so they bought 40 acres of land out on Peck Wadsworth Road in Wellington, Ohio. And so Dad, when he bought it, the house that was there had burnt down. And so they bought the bare land and they were going to build a house. And so in the meantime, to make some extra money, Dad was working and everything. So the land was sitting there, so Dad started farming it. And so I learned all about farming a lot. And when Dad was at work, I would go out to the farm. Mom would take me. I wasn't old enough to drive. I was just 15. And I would do whatever he told me to do that day. And as different things grew or crop came in or whatever, we had planted soybeans. And after they start coming up, you have to go through them and make sure the weeds are out of them. And we had a farm tractor. And I was on that farm tractor working. And I was pulling 3 machines behind me, a har, a rotary hoe, and a cultipacker. Everything about this just is so vivid. It sticks in my mind so much. And but I was going through the field back and forth, and back in the field, there was a big swale in the ground back there that was pretty deep, and it got kind of muddy down in there after it got wet or anything. But it was dry, but there was still mud down in there. And I was going back and forth. Mom was up front. We had a big garden up there, and she was working in that garden. And I went through that swale with that machine, and I got the machines I was pulling stuck in that mud. And so I decided I'd just drop the drawbar on the tractor and go around the other side, throw a chain on it, and pull it out the other way it came in. It was a shorter distance out of the mud that way. And so I went around there and put the chain on it. And when I put the chain on the tractor, I hooked too high on the back of the tractor, which is a definite no-no. And as soon as I took off, the tractor flipped over backwards, and it was on top of me. And Mom had noticed how long on a rhythm, like I guess, that it took me to go down and back to make a pass. In this particular time, I wasn't coming back for some reason. And so she didn't think a lot about it, she said. And she started wandering back in the field to see what was going on. And as soon as she topped the rise, where you could see down in that low spot, she seen the tractor upside down and me not around. And she started screaming, and I could hear her coming, hollering, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And she run down, and I was trapped underneath the tractor. And she started trying to dig me out, and I was caught from about my head up. The hood was on my head, and the steering wheel had me right about the chin level. My arms and legs were free, and the tractor was completely upside down, and I had been running hard for 3 or 4 hours, so everything on it was hot. And the transmission vent, when you're sitting upright, the transmission vent's right here for the transmission. So when you're upside down, it's up there now, and it's got red hot oil in it, and it's coming out, and it's dripping and scalding me on the chest. And she's trying to dig me out, and I'm in the dirt and mud, and I told her, I says, Mom, you can't dig me out. I could just barely speak because my jaw was shoved out. And I said, you're going to have to go get somebody with a tractor to pull it off of me. And she had a hard time leaving. And so finally I got her convinced, and so she left. And while I was laying under the tractor, I mean, I was hurting. I never had pain like I thought ever. Never felt anything like that before. And I remember just kind of just fading out of it. Don't remember being, not really, I didn't faint or anything. I just kind of drifted off. And in that drifting off, I started seeing my life, and everything that was fun or that stood out, that was good, all the highlights from the time could remember from when I was a little baby until, not a little baby, you can't remember, but as a young child. And it was going by, and it was just like flashcards or a movie reel going by. And it was just a flash, and I would recognize it, and just a flash, and I would recognize it. And while I was there, it started going faster and faster and faster, and it's moving up in time up until the present time. And by the time it got to the present time, it was just a blur, and it was just really bright white, like a movie projector light bulb shining in you. And that's all I could see. And I remember I didn't feel nothing anymore. I wasn't hurting no more. And I don't remember knowing what to think, but I just knew I don't hurt anymore. And where that was at was probably a quarter mile from the road. And so Mom had to leave me, run through the field about a quarter mile, and there just happened to be a kid going by on a bicycle. And there just happened to be a guy working with a big tractor across the field over there. And Mom caught him, told him, go tell that man the tractor's on top of my son back in the field. And the kid dropped his bicycle and took off running. And there was an old couple that lived across the street. There wasn't houses a mile on each side. And she ran across the street and told them, call the ambulance. My son turned a tractor on top of himself. And so they jumped in this old station wagon, and they came back there. And as they're, I'm not in it. I can't hear or see anything, or feel. I wasn't feeling nothing either. And as I started coming back to, there was a woman, and I could understand at first what she was saying, and I could hear my mom screaming, Jesus. And then as I got more into conscious, the woman was speaking in tongues, and she was holding on to me, and they were trying to get, I could hear the tractor pull up. And the first time they pulled the tractor, it didn't work. When the tractor turned over, part of the machine was laying on the hood of our tractor, so it was holding it up a little bit. When they pulled it the next time, it pulled it off of the machine, and now I'm completely crushed underneath this tractor. And I can't breathe or anything, and I started swailing and flailing around, and the woman said, he can't breathe, he can't breathe. I remember hearing her say that. So they changed the way they were pulling, and they got a hold of the tractor a different way, and they flipped the tractor back over and got me off and underneath it, and they put me in a station wagon, and the whole time this woman is praying, and my mom is praying and holding on to me. And they put me in this old station wagon, and they went flying back to Wellington, where there was a little hospital. And I went through 3 hospitals. At Wellington, they took me in there, and they said, no, there's nothing we can do for him here. The next one was Amherst, and they said, no, there's nothing we can do for him here. And they took me to St. Joe's finally, and they had 4 or 5 doctors, and there was a trauma specialist or something on duty. And they took me in there, and they left me there. And what was the problem was my head was swelling so bad from being smashed. And it was pretty wicked, I guess, because it would scare people when they seen me. And when my sister walked in the room, she fainted right on the spot, my older sister, Betty. And they didn't know what was going to happen. I was in critical condition for about a week. And after they thought they were going to have to do something on my head, I imagine drill a hole in my head to let the pressure off or something like that, but they never did. And finally, the swelling started going down, and it had completely smashed my eyeball flat, where my jawbone went up and my cheekbone went up. And they had worked and pulled that neck down and had crushed bones up here on my upper lip. And that eyeball came back flat, but I looked just like Terminator. There was just a red, bloody eye socket right there. And it was like that for about 6 or 8 months. It took a long time for that to ever clear up and go away. And after that, I just got well, and everything was okay.
That is quite a miracle, though.
Yes. That's my miracle. One of many.
But like just the fact that your mom happened to even think to come check on you, and then happen, like that's not accidental.
No, there's too many things had to be in place for me to be sitting here today.
And the lady that was also there speaking in tongues, was somebody from, you said, down the street?
She was across the street. She was an
across-
older woman, and it was the only house that was around.
Did you all
And-
know her before, or
Yeah,
met
we
her?
didn't really know her, but we had got acquaintance since we bought the land, and we had it for 3 or 4 years and worked the land there for 3 or 4 years. So we got to know them pretty good. And I guess Mom knew that she was a Christian. I wasn't concerned with that, being 15 years old,
Right.
but she was.
That's
amazing.
Thank you for sharing that, because I talked to some people and they're like, I don't think I've ever heard that story before. So
Yeah, it's not good. Back then it was really bad. It changed our whole path because we were camping and stuff like that, and said we didn't come to church. And after that happened, Mom and Dad both said, "No farm, we're selling that." They sold that farm, and that was in the early '70s. And that's about when Mom and Dad started coming to church under Johnny Wade Sloan. Was right up at that time. And that's kind of how I got started into church then, is because Dad would do Labor Day picnics and cook stuff like that. Mom would cook at camp, and sometimes we'd go by there and have lunch with her when she'd cook. And this is when they were cooking at the camp house right out down there in that little back room, and they would serve right out back because they were still in a tent out back.
So you guys went to Broadway as a kid, then you stopped going for a while, then you came back.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about just some questions about your life to inform the people. What kind of line of work were you in for?
I started out as a mechanic. I went to school for auto mechanics. I got some awards and stuff like that, and got pretty good at it, I guess. And I went to work for a marine contractor where my dad got a part-time job. He just wanted to do something extra. He's all the time looking for work. He couldn't sit still. And so I went to work with this marine contractor and was doing mechanic work for them. And the guy asked me, he said, hey, he says, you can drive the truck? And I said, yeah. And he says, I need you to take this piece of equipment over here. And so I took that piece of equipment over there with that truck. And that went pretty good. So the next time we were somewhere else, and then the next time it was in Detroit. So I had to haul equipment from Avon, is where his place was at, to Detroit. And I'd come back and I'm thinking, this is pretty cool. I'm making the same money and I ain't getting all dirty, and I'm just having fun driving this truck. And I started driving trucks. So I ended up joining the Teamsters in 1977. And from that job led to working for a construction company, Blue and Sun Asphalt Paving. And I drove a dump truck for a little while, and then I got into a concrete truck, a mix on a job site concrete truck. And then when I left there, I went to Jefferson, which was a place on the east side of Lorraine where they make drywall, and I hauled drywall. And from that, I met another guy that worked for E&L Transport hauling new cars over at the Ford plant. And he talked me into coming out there and putting in an application. And I went there and put an application in, and it was great. And so that's where I went, and I stayed there. And I ended up 43 years in the Teamsters.
That's awesome. Let's talk about Sister Novella. When did you guys meet? Kind of tell us. I'm sure people will be interested to hear that.
In the late 70s, I would be going out, me and my buddies. We weren't Christians, so we were out drinking. And we used to go to a place over here in Lorraine called Tiffany's, and it was a dance place, and they always had a live band and stuff. And we were in there all the time. That's where we all hung out in the evenings. And I was in there one time, and I had a buddy. His name was Louis. And Louis was pretty cool. He wasn't the kind of guy that the girls are drop dead, trying to get after, but he was friends with all the girls. They all liked him. And we're sitting there one night, and I see this set of legs down there sticking out of this booth. And I said, wow. And I said, who's that? And Louis looks down there and he says, oh, that's Novella. And I said, Novella? And he said, yeah, that's her name. I said, man, I'd like to meet her. He said, he grabbed me by the arm and he says, come on. And so we were right down there to her table. And she told me her name, and I told her mine. And usually I can't remember a name for 5 minutes. You could tell me your name, and I'd walk away and turn back, and I'd say, "No, what was your name?" But she told me her name one time, and I never forgot it. And so we decided to date a little bit. She was not looking for a boyfriend. I was not looking for a girlfriend. We were just looking to have somebody to go out with, to go dancing with, have a good time. And so this went on for about 2 weeks, and I'm thinking, this is getting more than just a girl to hang out with. I really like her. And she said about the same thing, that, after about 2 weeks, and after about a month, we were talking, driving down the road, and I was talking about this and that we should do, in the future and stuff like that. And she said, "It sounds like you're talking about the future, and we're not married, or you ain't even asked me or anything." And I said, "Well, would you marry me?" And we're driving down the road in my truck. And she looked at me, she goes, "Yeah." So that was our whirlwind romance.
Well, that was easy.
Yes. And it's been a whirlwind romance
Yeah,
ever since.
still is, huh?
Yep.
Well, I've noticed today you're both wearing white, and as many of you might notice, when they come to church, they're often or always matching, it seems like. What's that all about, and how long's that been going on?
Long time. I'd go to get dressed for church or something, and she'd be getting dressed. "You're going to wear that? That's going to clash with what I'm wearing." And so we'd kind of pick out things and say, "Okay, we'll wear this." And now it's turned into, the night before is a match-up contest for us to get matching clothes. And I don't know, a lot of guys feel funny about stuff like that, but that doesn't bother me. But I want people to know that she's with me.
That's awesome. You guys have been married how long now? 40-something years?
What year is this?
24?
44 years.
44 years.
Yes.
So what would you say has been kind of the secret to a long, happy marriage? What advice would you give to a young married couple?
Right after we got married, she had 2 girls when I married her. And right after we got married, there was always something going on, and there was the kids to take care of. And I asked her, I said, "Can I have just 1 hour a day of your undivided attention?" And she thought that was reasonable. And so we'd get the kids settled in and get them doing whatever they wanted to do, because Mom and Dad's going to go and sit and talk for an hour. We'd go to the bedroom or go to the other room or anything. Just don't disturb us. And after that, we're all yours. And we did that. And that was like our time to unload on each other. And we'd walk in there sometimes and be happy, and as could be. And other times we might go in there and might be a little upset with each other. But before we left that room, we walked out hand in hand, and we were okay.
It seems like, as a teenager, early on, you were in a family that went to church. You were practicing. But when did you really decide? It seemed like later on, maybe, is when you really made a serious decision. When was that to follow Christ?
We got married in 1980, and Novella in 81 or so, 81 and a half, she got saved, and she started coming to Broadway Assembly under Johnny Wade Sloan. And I was not ready for that yet. I knew what Christianity was going to be. You're not going to be able to do this anymore. And I was still doing a lot of that stuff and going out with my friends and stuff like that. And when she didn't want to go anymore, I really slowed down a lot. And but she got saved in 81, and in 85, Krista was born. She was born in January. And when Krista was born, this is the story that she tells me. When Krista was born, Brother Sloan came into the hospital to see her. And when he was in the room with Novella, and Krista was there as a baby, I wasn't in the room. He asked Novella, he said, "What's the one thing that you would like God to do with that little girl?" And she told him that every time that Don looks at Krista to see the wonders of God, of the miracles and the things that Christianity is all about. And they prayed about it and said, okay. And then after that, every time I looked at Krista, I just couldn't believe that this little girl is something that, was us. And what a miracle it is. And that really touched me and got me going. And in April, I was here for Easter, and that's when I come up front and got saved. Right after that, within 3 or 4 months.
That's a better story than saying, she was a terrible child and, you needed the Lord to rely on or something like that.
That's
awesome.
You talk about a kid being the apple of your eye. She was my head. It wasn't just an eye.
That's awesome. We don't have much time left, but we can't talk about you without talking about your excellency as a cook. And I'm going to skip a couple questions, but I'm curious, people would maybe interested to know, how did you come about that you started the corn on Wednesday night at camp?
This was another thing. When Krista was born, and I started coming to church, and as I got coming to church, I still wanted to do more things. I had been involved a little bit with cooking with Dad, because he would cook the Labor Day picnics, and we'd roast pigs and different things, and chicken roast and stuff like that. And so was always an attraction to that. Mom always had all of us boys cook. She says, if you never get married, at least you ain't going to starve to death. And so she taught us the basics of cooking and stuff like that. And so after I got saved and was coming to the church more, and I made more friends and stuff, and I just wanted to do something, and so we had done some corn roast at home like that. And so the first corn roast was right after Krista was born that year in '85. And
so you've been doing that since you've been saved?
Yes. Yeah. And the first one was real small. I just took a 55-gallon drum and cut it in half and cooked some corn on it, and it was okay, but there wasn't nearly enough. And then the next year we went a little bit bigger, and we always had some grates that we'd cook barbecue chicken on when Dad would do the Labor Day picnic, and I set those up and did corn, and it just kind of grew from there. And then not too long after that, Brother Treadway, I don't see him here, he worked at the steel mill, and the steel mill made us those grills that we have out there now. And they were perfect for what I do with the corn roast. And now Reese is going to be my predecessor, I hope, to the corn roast, because I could step away and he could do it all right now, just perfect. I couldn't do it without him now. As I've gotten older, everything's heavier and trying to move things around. And he's fast. And
well, on behalf of the church, I say thank you for doing that, because that's a highlight of camp every year. Any questions, Brother James, for wrap up?
Nope. Is there anything that, any other advice that you would offer to the church?
Back to the cooking again. Mom, like I said, taught us all to cook, and I would help her with a few meals and stuff like that. And then it turned into, she would say, why don't you do this time? And I'd say, okay. She goes, I'll help you. She says, but you take charge of it. And so I wanted to do something back for the church. And when the weddings would come up and stuff like that, and people were trying to get a wedding put together that they were going to have at the camp, they had to come up with some kind of a meal or something. And I thought, that's something that I could give that couple for their wedding, and just pay for the food and everything else be taken care of. And so that's how we ended up starting to cook weddings, and we did that for 30-something years, and then cooked mission banquets and everything else. And it just got to the point that it is more than I can handle, and I don't want to be responsible for somebody's wedding day and have something go wrong that I can't do it. And it's
you cooked the food for our wedding, so I remember mentioning that to you a couple years ago, and you went on your phone and you're like, yep, you had this, still had the menu.
I wish that I would have kept track of who all that we had cooked weddings for. I never did, because I wasn't doing it for numbers. I was doing it because that's what God told me to do.
Yeah, That's I didn't even ask the question, but after you started coming to Broadway, got saved, how have you tried to be a faithful servant of the Lord here? And that's that's a way that we can sometimes overlook and thinking of cooking food. That's not really that spiritual or what, but that's a ministry. It really is, and I appreciate you using your talents for the Lord.
Oh, you're welcome.
Anything else you want to mention before we wrap up?
Nothing I can think of.
All right, well, let's give Brother Brewer a hand this morning. Great job. Great job. We'll pray and ask the Lord to help us today. God, thank you so much for this story and Brother Brewer sharing it with us. Thank you for sparing his life as a 15-year-old. Thank you for saving him and allowing him to be here, a faithful member of the church. God, I pray that you would bless him, bless Sister Novella today as well. Bless our church this morning. We pray, God, that you would just minister in this service. To you be all the glory in Jesus' name. Everybody says...